All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'm going to also in this meeting, we ended up with, we've got one member who's out of town, we've got one who's ill, and then we're up against Senate Transportation, which was not the chair's intent. I will say this meeting was scheduled first, but I think they're wrestling with a pretty significant issue there in Senate Transportation, so that's obviously where a lot of the interest is today. So what I'm probably going to do is pare the agenda back a little bit. We probably will not do the TOD update today. We'll save that for a meeting later on in the month. And we'll also probably, I think with four members here, three of which have already considered the MARTA legislation that is progressing through the General Assembly, we probably don't need to go over that either. So I'll just talk directly with Senator Albers about it. But we do have one of our new. We have a fairly strong committee this term. After the appointments were made by the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor. We do have one of our new members here, so I do want Senator Albers to introduce himself. He needs no introduction, but we'll do a formal introduction here. Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I represent the 56th State Senate District, which is kind of the middle of North Fulton County. It is the northern part of Sandy Springs, all of Roswell and Mountain Park, and then the southern parts of Milton, Alpharetta, and Johns Creek. And then I have a little tiny portion of Cherokee County as well, but only a couple of thousand folks. So it's good to be here. Good to get a chance to develop a relationship with everybody, and look forward to working together. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Senator Albers. Let's get the committee rules passed out. These are identical to the committee rules for the 2013-2014 term. In that term, we reduced the quorum from 5 to 4. We briefly considered, while we were sitting up here, reducing it to 3, but we're going to stick with 4. And so I'll give the members a second to review the committee rules. And I'll also say this upcoming term is a significant one. Usually we do hearings in this committee on various issues of interest either to the chairman or members of the committee. But we did place in the MARTA Act a requirement that management audit be performed every 4 years, and as everyone who's in the room here knows, the chairman takes that very seriously and considers that a very important task for this committee to complete. That has to be done in 2016, the first one, and so there actually is some significant work for this committee to perform in the upcoming term that will require some votes and some work on the part of the committee in terms of making decisions. So that being said, I'll let the committee members review the rules, and then I'll take a motion when we're ready to go.
Mr. Chairman, move to pass.
All right, is there a second? Second. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the rules? Seeing none, the chair calls the question. All those in favor of passing the committee rules for the upcoming term say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The rules are adopted. Well, if you leave, we don't have a quorum, but we'll go quickly. Okay. Next up, I'd like to hear from Mr. Allen on, I do want to recognize we've got the chair of the MARTA board, Robbie Ash, in the room with us today, as well as Mr. Parker. Mr. Ash, do you want to? I think we have some new board members present, and old board members. Not to call them old, but. Oh, it's
okay. Happy birthday.
They're experienced board members, so if you'd like to do some introductions, Mr. Ash, before we start.
Certainly, and thank you all, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to be here. Jim Durrett needs no introduction. He's been on the MARTA board for years. And then the other two members of the board who are here, and Chris Tomlinson is here as well in his capacity as ex officio member of the board. And then the other two members of the board who are here need no introduction either. But for the purposes of it, Roberta Abdul Salam, who served as the state representative from Clayton County for a number of years, is a new member of the MARTA board thanks to Clayton County joining the system. And our other new member of the board from Clayton County is Jerry Griffin, who, as you know, ran the ACCG admirably for quite some time.
Right.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ash. And the one note I will make on the new board appointments is that at some point you may want to talk with your commissioners about the staggering of these two board positions. One of the things that we neglected to do in last year's legislation was stagger new board members coming on. And so that's going to be done this year, and then at that point, the Clayton County Commission is going to have to make a decision as to who starts off with the 2-year term and who starts off with a 4-year term. So, Mr. Allen, transformation initiatives.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the martoc committee.
God bless you.
Bless you.
Okay, today we're going to give you an update on the Model Transformation Initiative. This first slide reflects the 12 initiatives that were adopted by the board back in 2013. This is also the 5-year transformation roadmap. As you can see, we've been working on these initiatives pretty diligently. We've got 12 here. Off the 12, 7 of these initiatives are optimization initiatives or outsourcing. The other 5 are efficiency initiatives. The ones that are coded in the blue are the initiatives that we're currently working on. Some of those work streams have been completed. The last 3 or 4, we are still working on those work streams today. I'm going to walk through a little presentation and give you a status of each one of those initiatives all the way through Initiative 7. Now, the first initiative is our Procurement Enhancement Initiative. As you recall, this initiative I presented a while back. The major goal of this initiative was to reduce our procurement processing cycle time. The goal was to try to reduce that cycle time by 25%. One of the other things that came out of this initiative, the Board of Directors consent agenda was also adopted. The GM level of authorization was increased from $100,000 to $200,000. Which also helped us to improve on our processing cycle time. We created a new handbook for all of the procurement employees and staff throughout MARTA. We've had a training, about 26 different training sessions with over 250 employee participants in that training session. That training session was completed back in February last month, and we are implementing all of those procedures, and we're going to go back and test to see if we are achieving that 25% cycle time reduction in about 6 to 9 months. The second initiative, personnel cost efficiencies. Under this initiative, we reviewed all of MARTA's health care and retirement plan. Under the health care, we were able to make some changes there that would affect our retirees on the ATU side as far as their premium payment. Also, this also helped us in getting agreement with the new collective bargaining agreement that was approved by the MARTA board this year. One thing that's still outstanding there, we've got a new AGM of HR, and the AGM is looking at the HR department in totality to see if there's any restructuring that she deemed necessary. So the only thing outstanding there, we're waiting on the new AGM of HR to make a review of the existing HR department. This next initiative was the revenue enhancement. Under this initiative, we were looking at all of our existing revenues to see what we could do to enhance some of those revenues. Some of those areas that we were looking at was our marketing, TOD, in which you're going to get a presentation on in the next meeting. We also looked at real estate. We got parcels of land that we easement. Some of these lands we're going to try to sell. We also looked at revenue, our revenue service, where our automated parking is. I know you heard that we're also looking to outsource parking, and that's going along fairly well. We've published an RFP back in December 22nd. That RFP deadline for the proponents to respond is April 20th. So we should be coming back with some good feedback on the outsourcing of parking.
And I'll just say, I mean, I know that there's been some discussion in the media about that particular initiative. The chair likes it.
Great.
And certainly would like to see MARTA follow through with it. I mean, that's really where most commercial parking providers are at this point. As you know, my strong preference, and it seems to be that this is where everybody is that, you know, for patrons of the MARTA system, that they not be charged anything. That you only look to get folks who are parking, you know, long term. A day or longer in the MARTA parking decks, but as far as automating the collection of parking fees, that I think is where the private sector is and where MARTA ought to be.
And we also can reduce our operating budget by doing that also. The next one initiative we looked at is the HR payroll sourcing. I know you've heard a lot about that. We issued an RFP a while back. We've had 3 people to respond to the RFP, 3 proponents. One we were able to eliminate because they were not responsive to requirements in the RFP, and we moved forward with 2 proponents of the HR payroll sourcing. Now, the purpose here was to reduce MARTA's operating costs with HR and payroll and to show some efficiencies there also. This next slide shows the results of that RFP.
Well, let's back up there. So, as I understand it, the board made a decision not to accept any of the proposals and to keep it in house. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's going to be on the next slide.
All right, go ahead. Well, continue, and then I'll ask my questions.
Okay. Now, as the chair stated, the board we presented this to the board this week with the results from the evaluation. And as you can see here, from the technical scoring from the 2 proponents, the proponent A technical scores was 61.47 out of 75, which was pretty good. The proponent B was 46.26. Thing to note here is proponent B submitted 2 proposals, one offshore and one in the state. When I say offshore, they wanted to do everything in Pune, India. That was their second proposal. The first one was to have it here from Cincinnati out of the States. So as you can see, from a technical standpoint, proponent A did pretty good. Proponent B was middle of the road there with a score of 46.26 on both proposals. Now, when we get down to the pricing, this is where we had the difficulty. Proponent A priced, this is an 8-year proposal. Their pricing to do all of our payroll and HR functions were about $33.5 million. Proponent B, which submitted 2 different proposals, the one that was on state side, that proposal was $33.1 million, and to do all of our operation offshore in Pune, India, that cost was going to be $19.3 million. Now that next number there, you see the $29,440. We looked at what MARTA's current cost would be over the next years to keep it in house and to do our HR and payroll. MARTA's current cost is $29.4 million. So both proponents exceeded that. Also, both proponents recommended that MARTA retain staff in-house to assist in the sourcing, which were not included in their numbers. In order for MARTA to maintain staff that they suggested, that's an additional $7.9 million over 8 years. So that $7.9 million added to the 33 that they proposed, we were looking at roughly about $41 million to outsource this, where MARTA is doing it now for $29.4 million. So based upon that, the board recommended that we made a presentation to the board recommending that we reject all bids, and the board agreed with us.
And this would have included both processing of payroll, you know, the actual issuance of the direct deposit advices and all of that, as well as you know, call centers and all.
100% of payroll operation, except the back end. Like, keep in mind, we deal with a lot of union workers, ATU side. That was the staff that we were going to have to maintain to do that front end work. and getting all the information into the system for the proponents to work up.
And both proponents recommended that they, that in-house costs remain in place?
They recommended a set amount of staff to remain here to assist in the operation.
How does MARTA presently process payroll checks, issue? I mean, it's all. I mean, that's all done from Piedmont Road.
Oh yes, sir, from Piedmont Road.
Okay. What I'd like to do, I'm not. I don't. Is there any plan to? And are there? I mean, were there any issues in the? Were there any issues in the scope of the RFP that may have caused the proponents to come back higher than anticipated? I mean, did the scope of the RFP itself have an impact here?
Right.
Well, how so then?
Well, the scope, we detail all the model requirements to fully do our payroll. And I think that was the piece that wasn't quite understood by KPMG when they first came up with their recommendation. Our payroll is a lot different from private industry. When we started looking at it, there's not a transit property in the country that has outsourced payroll. So it's a lot difficult than just cutting a check. Right now, our operators and A2U employees, in order to cut a check for them, they get paid 50 different ways, And so it's not as simple as saying you work 40 hours, time your hourly rate, and here's your check. It doesn't work like that.
I mean, that may be true, but I mean, looking back at the audit, which of course was a comparison of looking back at the audit itself, not the roadmap, but the audit, which of course was a comparison of MARTA to peer transit systems. I mean, even if they're not outsourcing, I mean, MARTA's benefit administration cost per employee was at $220 versus other systems $120. Recruiting $240 versus $154 per employee. Records and data management $194 versus $74. I mean, it's significantly higher in-house costs at MARTA than pure transit systems. So how does that get addressed?
We've already addressed most of that. We've implemented a self-service type system, which has saved MARTA significant dollars. From that system, the employees are now able to go online, print out their own pay slip. We have a paperless process now. Nobody gets a check. Everything is direct deposited. They can go to this system and get W-2s. They can print out a whole host of things of their own personal information, whereas we used to have staff to do that. By implementing this new system, we were able to eliminate 3.5 FTEs.
Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this information. A couple of questions. I understand that there's not a like transit system that has outsourced this. Have you looked at, though, I mean, obviously there's a lot of businesses that utilize union labor that will probably have different methods of paying folks. Have you compared that to what other companies? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
One other question.
Certainly.
Maybe it would help. The chairman had questions about the differences and what the survey. Nice ringtone, my friend. Had questions about the differences in the KPMG audit. Based on the changes that you have made up to this point, could we get some updated, reflected numbers to look at what that comparison would be maybe in the future?
We can.
That'd be great.
I think that would be helpful. I also do want to take a look at the RFP itself, as well as the proposals submitted by the proponents, just to, and it's quite possible that this ends up being one of the areas that goes in the next management audit to re-benchmark it to see if we're at least achieving cost savings with the steps that are being taken in house.
Okay.
All right.
Can I have one more question?
Senator Albers.
Thank you. The last question would be: is now that we've gone through this process, does it make sense to have a smaller RFP process to maybe pick off just a few of these things that could make sense? As an example, maybe we want ADP to cut the checks and do some basic stuff, but maybe not all of this information. Is there an opportunity for a partial savings there?
I really don't believe so. When you look at model staffing, just cutting the check, we are down to roughly about 5 people in our accounting office now, just cutting checks. So
What was it before?
it was like 9.
If we can, why don't we do this? I do think that it would be helpful to the committee, and you can do this by submitting them to my office, to have the RFP itself as well as the proposals submitted by the proponents, full copies. I'm going to put this item back on the agenda for the next committee meeting, which will be before the end of the month. It'll be before the end of session. And for that presentation, I specifically want to see the cost savings between where we were at the time of the KPMG audit and where we are now in terms of projected cost savings of performing payroll and HR functions in-house.
Okay, we'll get that for you.
All right.
Okay, the next initiative is our paratransit optimization. And we've been working on this initiative for almost a year now. The RFP is 99% developed. The Board of Directors approval to solicit this RFP on March 5th. That just happened last week. And we are going to get that RFP on the street hopefully within the next couple of weeks. Now, with paratransit, we're keeping in-house that bottom piece down now, which are our certification, eligibility, and travel training. That piece will not be part of the RFP, but the top piece, the 100% operation of our paratransit, will be in the RFP. That means the drivers, the buses, all the equipment will be a part of the RFP that we're going to put on the street.
Senator Fort.
Are you finished with
Yes, sir.
your comments on paratransit? Let me ask you this. When will the RFP be finished? And,
Well, we're shooting for about the next 2 to 3 weeks.
okay. All right. May I follow up, Mr. Chair?
You may.
What, in terms of staffing, you're going to be, the RFP is for dry. All right. I was asking a question.
I'm sorry.
You
Go
did-
right ahead.
I just want to make sure you hear me.
Oh, yeah.
The RFP will include drivers, will cover what else will it cover? I'm sorry.
All operation, drivers, the buses, and scheduling.
All right. You've been talking about this for a year, and then there was some discussion about it long before that. At this point, the thing that concerns me, and I've heard different things from different folk, is the participation of your disabled customer in the process. That is to making sure that they have input into this process, even in the development of the RFP. Can you talk to me? Can you tell the committee what the participation of those people, the customers that will be using the service, what that's been, or maybe you haven't. I don't know.
Yes,
but
sir.
uh-huh.
Our head of our DEO department set up a Blue Ribbon panel, and he invited a number of people from that community, and he worked with them. In fact, I attended some of the meetings with him where he had people in there, that we talked about this situation, and a lot of them agreed that we needed to do something, and they made a lot of suggestions of some of the things that we need to include into this RFP.
I'll just say this, and I'll be finished for the time being. I've gotten some input from organizations outside of that Blue Ribbon Committee about their participation, and I'll follow up with Mr. Parker on that. But the point they were making is that they wanted input with impact. Just giving input is one thing, but having having it taken seriously and folded into the process is what they're talking about. But I appreciate you, and we'll have an opportunity, I think, to talk at length. Mr. Parker, I'd like to sit with you and talk to you about that at some time in the near future. Thank you.
Oh yeah, one other thing that we're still doing on the paratransit, we're still working with ATU to get recommendation from them. We've been working with ATU now for the past year, requesting that they participate and give us their thoughts on what we could do to curb this service and make it more economically feasible for us and to improve our performance there. And so we're still working with them. We're getting suggestions from them as to what we can do.
Have you thought about asking them for a proposal?
We've done that also.
All right, that would be a good thing. Maybe they can do better than the folk who going to be responding. I mean, it's happened in other cities, correct, where the unions have competed
Yes.
on a, with private sector and come up with some pretty good responses. Thank you.
Competition is good.
The last slide here, the remaining upcoming initiatives for fiscal year 15 and 16, we're working on 3 separate things here. The cleaning services, we're working right now on that to see what we can do for some efficiencies there and some cost savings. Workers' compensation cost containment, that's another initiative that we're going to be working on in the coming weeks, and parking services that I just spoke of. So those are the final 3 we're going to be working on during fiscal year 15 and 16. Any other questions?
The chair has no further questions. As I said, I would like to see some documentation on the HR and payroll, RFPs and proposals, and then let's plan on preparing a presentation for the next meeting that shows the projected cost savings in-house based upon, what specific steps have been taken to achieve cost savings in-house, and what the projected costs are vis-a-vis the benchmarks that were in the 2012 KPMG audit.
Okay. Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And next up, we have a presentation on the Clayton County implementation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Thank you so very much for allowing me to come out and speak with you about the Clayton County Transit Service update. As you're aware, the residents of Clayton County elected to tax themselves through a 1-cent sales tax to reestablish transit services within the Clayton County area. The estimated revenue that will come from that sales tax is approximately $46 million per year. The services that we are looking to implement will start on March 21st with 3 routes, and I'll talk about that a little later. And also, we will continue to roll out the planned services in August as well as December. In order for us to get prepared to start delivering the services on March the 21st, the agency had to had to purchase at least 55 vehicles, 33 to 35 of which are for our fixed route service delivery, and 20 vehicles for our paratransit services, our services for people with disabilities. Additionally, we had to hire at least 103 fixed route operators and additional 25 mobility operators. And of course, we had to hire some additional support staff, such as maintenance technicians, customer service staff, as well as supervisors. When we took a look at these demographics through the 2010 census and looking at the sustainability of transit in the Clayton County area, one of the things that we recognized was that less than a quarter of the population was below the poverty line. And also nearly a third or over a third of the households had either 1 car or less. And so we feel that this area does provide us with a means of sustainability for transit. When we further look at Clayton County as compared to other counties within the region, we find that Clayton County has a much younger population at the median age of 31 years of age, as well as the income is lower than the region at about $42,000 per household. The region on average is about 34, 35 in age, and then less than $60,000 in median household income. This next slide gives us an idea of transit proficiency, and what we do, and this is the information that's derived from the Atlanta Regional Commission, where they take a look at population density, average household income, and other factors such as cars in the household. And that gives us a proficiency of transit and really being able to determine where would transit really work. And as you can see down in Clayton County, we have some very highlighted areas in blue, most especially focusing in on the Riverdale area. As I mentioned, for the services that are starting on March 21st, we're starting with 3 routes. The first route, the Route 196, the green alignment, that route will start at the South Lake Mall and will traverse through the county up to our College Park rail station. The second route, the Route 55, will start at the intersection of Jonesboro Road and Forest Parkway, and that will terminate at our 5 Points rail station. The third route, which is the Route 15 on your far right, that one will start in the area of the Ellenwood Industrial Park, and that particular route will terminate at our Decatur rail station. This next chart gives us an indication of what our services will look like over the next 10 to 15 years. Our staff worked closely with the Clayton County team with looking at their feasibility plan, and our systems, our plans almost identically match one another with certain exceptions. However, in about 10 to 15 years, we anticipate of having at least 10 fixed bus route alignments, 1 high-capacity transit alignment, certainly our paratransit complimentary service, and then also we're looking to put in flex routes. Now, flex routes are really unique to this particular area. There are a number of transit agencies that are starting to do this type of service, and this is where you utilize smaller vehicles to be able to navigate into the neighborhood where larger vehicles wouldn't be appropriate. Also, when you looked at that last slide, you would have noticed that we've identified areas where we would be able to create transit hubs. And this is where multiple routes come into one particular area, and people are able to transfer from one route to the other. As you can see, we've identified about 5 to 6 transit hubs. And these hubs, we feel that several of them will be great candidates for, or at least be candidates for transit-oriented development. And we will continue to study that as we continue to move forward. So let's talk a little bit about our outreach to the community as well as working with elected and non-elected officials. We did have a team of staff to go down and talk with the residents through focus groups to get an impression of what they thought about safety and security when they're utilizing the transit services. And we're planning to reach out to the community for limited English proficiency as well. We've hosted 5 or 6 what we call MARTA days, and that's where we've taken vehicles down to the area with staff and allowed the residents to come and talk to us about the services that we're proposing, also on talk to them about how to utilize the system, how to ride the system, as well as try to get ahead of the game and allow the customers to go ahead and load Breeze cards and really encourage them to register their Breeze cards as well. Also, Mr. Parker and several of our staff members had what we call a munch and learn, where we met with the mayors within the Clayton County area, and again, talking about the services and the expectations of the services, and really focusing on the safety and security aspect. Several members within our leadership team met with Clayton County Commission's leadership team, orienting them to our organization as well as the proposed services. And lastly, we held several job fairs down in Clayton County where we had nearly 3,000 participants at those at those job fairs. And on my last slide, just wanted to share with you as we gear up for our March 21st implementation, we're going to deploy additional buses and operators in case that the demand is higher than the capacity that we're planning for during that first week of services, as well as we're going to place staff out at major boarding areas to help our customers who are first-time users and who may have questions about the services. That ends my presentation. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
You do have a question, Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this update. I think we're all very excited to have Clayton in MARTA, and hopefully it will be the beginning of getting some of our other metro counties to want to join as well. You mentioned the $46 million of expected revenue. Do we know what that translates from a cost perspective, though, to MARTA? What are we expecting the cost going to be versus the revenue incoming?
Yes, sir, Senator, and welcome to the committee. I'm Keith
Thank you.
Parker, the General Manager of MARTA. We anticipate, we've constructed the agreement with Clayton to offer two different buckets of money. Of that $46 million, half would go towards daily operations of the bus service, which includes buses and the police officers and bus operators and whatnot, and the other half would go towards what we call a high-capacity transit option. So we're actually putting those dollars aside while we look and explore the possibility of actually adding commuter rail to the Clayton area. So the first penny pays in full, the first half penny pays in full for all the bus services, and the second half we're using to try to implement this high-capacity transit option.
That's great. And while you're there, that led to a comment anyway. I wanted to say a big congratulations to you, Mr. Parker. In the last 20 years, I don't think MARTA has had a more positive vibe, and the chatter in this or these buildings has had the most confidence ever, and I attribute a lot of that to the board and to your leadership specifically. So I want to thank you for doing that, and I think we really have an opportunity in front of us right now that, candidly, I've never seen before. And I'm excited about that. And I want to ask you one other thing, because I've got a hard stop here in just a couple of minutes. I did a lot of research over the fall and winter time, and in all of my research, I determined one thing. Everybody loves trains, and they're so-so on buses, right? Everybody loves a train. Maybe it's because we all played with them as kids, right? And as I looked around, I saw there were certain places all over the world that have really changed the user experience, if you will, for a bus. And in fact, a couple of them that I was looking at online looks like a traditional kind of accordion double bus, but when it pulls up, the way it's sloped, it almost looks like the Atlanta streetcar, actually. In fact, you don't even see the tires on it. And the way that you get on it, you feel like you're riding a train, but it can turn left and right, right? It's pretty extraordinary. And I was curious, what your vision is and how you see that evolving over time, where we can have kind of a hybrid, because as much as we'd like to, we can't put a rail line everywhere, right? And they're going to play an important role to play. But is there something that we can have as a hybrid solution to help that user experience?
Yes, well, thank you for the compliment, and I completely agree with you that we have great board leadership and have a great team of executive management. But in regards to the bus rapid, what you're describing is bus rapid transit, and we actually implemented one of those lines in one of my former systems, and we are undergoing now what's called a comprehensive operations analysis, where we're going to significantly revamp the entire bus network. And as a big component of that, we expect to introduce those types of vehicles you mentioned on some of our very high-dense, highly used, highly densified and highly used corridors, these bus rapid transit types of vehicles with, some people call it the accordion look in between them where they've been. But yes, that's something that's in our very near future.
Wonderful. I look forward to taking that inaugural ride with you up Georgia 400.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Geisinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first want to apologize for skipping out for a few minutes because Natural Resources was having a meeting just above us, and we voted out the marshes protection of 25 feet. So we did some good work above us. You were quoting some numbers in regards to Clayton County in relation to incomes. How many of the, or what percentage of the population is on Medicaid?
Well, sir, I don't have that particular number. Those were just statistical numbers that we were able to derive from through our research through the ARC and other economic development agencies.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask another question?
Yes.
Also, in regards to paratransit, have you done a study in regards to determining how much paratransit you're going to have?
Well, what we typically do, we look at, first of all, paratransit operates either 3/4 of a mile on one side of the alignment and 3/4 of a mile on the other side. Based upon historical information of services that we currently have and what we performed several years ago when C-Train was in place, that's how we determine the number of vehicles that we would need.
Thank you.
Senator Fort.
I have a question for Mr. Parker. Sorry to get you up and down. The question, commuter rail, you explained us the division of revenues, operations versus commuter rail. Where's the discussion now with the people, the railroads, and others about doing that? Because there's very critical discussion in the run-up to the referendum, and commitments were made, and I think those commitments are very important, and I entirely supportive. Where are we and give us a time frame for for implementation of the commuter rail?
We're very early in the discussions with Norfolk Southern, who's the owner of the right-of-way. The other element that we would need to establish sometime in this current year, this current calendar year, is a formation of a committee that would help guide us in exactly what we end up with, maybe take them on some site visits to see other commuter rail and other high-capacity transit options in place, and then ultimately that group will make a recommendation along with the MARTA staff to the county commission of how to proceed and how to move forward. Timeline are, if things work out very well, the discussions with Norfolk Southern go very well, we could have some idea of what their needs are in terms of what their plans are of the corridor, and then how we can fit what our commuter rail needs would be within a 2 to 3 year period. Then we go through the design element, the design phase, and again, I think being realistic to optimistic, a 7 to 10 year time frame to be completely up and running, but very much fluid because there's so many different moving parts in this.
And what is our cost? 7 to 10 years is a very, I won't say aggressive, but it's a good time frame. What are we talking about in terms of costs?
And that's going to depend in large part as to exactly how we end up building this. If, again, we've got some hurdles to jump through,
Sure.
or jump over. If we can work out a reasonable agreement with Norfolk Southern, we then have to decide, are we building our exclusive exclusive track for the MARTA commuter rail train, or are we sharing some type of right-of-way experience with Norfolk Southern? That impacts price. How frequent the service runs, how long the line is, how many stops, how many stations. All those things are parts of what we would be discussing with this task force and ultimately with the citizens of Clayton County as we make those types of decisions. But that's too early to say here's exactly what it would look like, but those are the types of variables that would be involved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions? Representative Geisinger.
Mr. Parker, I was involved, as you know, a number of years ago, early 70s, in state planning and community affairs, which handled MARTA as far as its development and legislation is concerned. At that time, I pictured it running all the way to Gainesville and Rome and wherever, because I had been raised in the North. And that's the way the transportation system worked up there. I even wrote then President of Southern Company Graham Clater and suggested that we use his right-of-way. I'm pleased to see that they're beginning to consider it, because in those days he said, no, we're in the freight business, not the passenger business, and ignored the fact that I didn't want them to carry passengers. What I wanted them to carry, what I wanted them to do was to let MARTA have a portion of their right-of-way, because their right-of-ways are wide enough to put more track in. But bless you for your direction, and I would think that 10 years is a long time. I would hope it would be closer to 2 to 3 years. Thank you.
That's called setting expectations. All right. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for the presentation.
And thank you all very much.
A couple of additional notes. First of all, with regard to Clayton County, I will say that a particularly strong choice for this committee by the governor. Unfortunately, he is ill today and was not able to make it. Representative Mike Glanton is now a member of MARTOC, and certainly we'll see him around here going forward. That's kind of the first Clayton County member of MARTOC at a time. I don't know if it's the first ever Clayton County member of MARTOC, but certainly the first Clayton County member of MARTOC at a time that Clayton County was a member of the MARTA system. So there's that. The other thing I do want to point out with regard, I know we decided not to do the legislative bit today, but in the transportation bill, I would recommend and request that MARTA engage a little bit more strongly on this issue, and we were all kind of caught by surprise by it when the amendment was presented on the House floor to House Bill 170 by Representative Setzler, by Chairman Setzler. That amendment, as I read it, and Ms. O'Neill, correct me if I'm wrong, but Clayton County does not have a local constitutional amendment regarding MARTA, correct?
That's correct.
DeKalb and Fulton do, though. Is that right? Or maybe not?
Well, Clayton was initially included as part of the metropolitan region described in the constitutional amendment. So
In the Constitution, but not a local. Now, local constitutional amendment's a different animal than the state constitution itself. And I don't even know whether DeKalb and Fulton have one. I mean, but the way that amendment was worded here, let me cut to the chase. The way that amendment was worded, it suggested to me that regardless of whether a county has adopted a MARTA referendum, that any extension of rail in that county, if it doesn't have a local constitutional amendment, which is a different legal creature than the 1983 Constitution itself, as amended, would have to have a referendum for each and every extension of rail in that county. And that obviously affects Clayton County. It may also affect Fulton and DeKalb counties. And I certainly will, because there's no set of circumstances where Clayton County is going to have a local constitutional amendment that speaks to MARTA. So it would be the chair's, and I'll certainly engage to the extent it's helpful. I think you'll have some receptive decision makers in the Senate as well, because I suspect that the proponents of that amendment are now over in the Senate trying to get it added into the transportation bill. It would be the chair's strong preference that if such an amendment were to be, or such a provision were included in the transportation bill, that at least if you've adopted a MARTA referendum, then anything that goes on after that with regard to rail service in a county that's adopted the MARTA referendum be carved out. And I don't think the amendment that was presented did that, and I want to make sure that we're fully engaged on that issue because I think it's important.
we'll go back to the
Senator Ford.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm ignorant of what happens in the House most of the times. Can you give us a thumbnail as to what Representative Setzler's amendment was?
Well, there was an amendment that I think was meant to address local issues in Cobb County. All three co-sponsors were Cobb County representatives.
Well, I'm completely ignorant of what happens in Cobb County.
But the way that it was worded, I think it applied all across the state, and it basically said that whenever you have any kind of extension of rail in any county, for any reason, there has to be a referendum for that extension of rail. The amendment failed narrowly on the House floor, but an amendment that fails narrowly sounds to me like an amendment that someone's going to try to make happen elsewhere in the legislative process. And I don't really want to speak to the proposition as affects other counties other than potential MARTA counties. But if a county's had a MARTA referendum and it's passed, then I don't think there should be any further need for any kind of referendum. Yeah. And it's passed. Yeah, that's a key part of that. All right. Anything further from members? Senator Ford.
I know Board Member Roberta Abdul Salam is here. I assume she's been introduced already.
She has indeed.
But I want to give her special recognition for her hard work over these many years on MARTA issues, and also keeping your commitment to making sure that regular citizens were involved in the process, more important than anything else. And we appreciate you and value you for that. Thank you for being here.
And as somebody who started in the House with Roberta, I would say that I am just very, very pleased to see her back in the mix and look forward to working with her in the future. All right. So there being nothing further to come before let me say this. We are going to have another meeting between now and the end of the session. I'll get with MARTA staff regarding scheduling. We know at least two of the items that will be on that agenda. And there being nothing further to come before the committee today, this meeting's adjourned.